Good evening, Hilo Movie Club. My name is Charlie Dickey. Sometimes I'm a film festival programmer, sometimes I am a manager at the Stanford Theater in downtown Palo Alto. All the time, though, I am an absolute cinema and movie nerd. And tonight I am proud to host a virtual screening of one of my all-time favorite features, uh, director Roman Zerker's 2013 feature debut, The Strange Little Cat, a dramedy that is part Chantal Ackerman, part Jacques Tati, but entirely 100% its own beast. Uh, it's a small little story focusing on one family's experiences throughout the day in a Berlin apartment, and it draws out the uncanny from the mundane. The film has the really deceptively simple synopsis on IMDb. Quote, "A family in a house and a chain of events that take place on an ordinary evening that they plan to have dinner with relatives." I like that they don't even like spoil whether or not the dinner occurs. Spoilers. It does. They have dinner with relatives. Spoilers. Um, this film has roots in the tradition of the Kammerspiel, or chamber play. It's a German theatrical tradition that dates back to the early 20th century, when theater director Max Reinhardt would craft like really small, intimate performances for little tiny audiences, focusing on smaller stories and character psychology. Like the smallness of scope is really the point here rather than a limitation imposed. And cinematically, after the Kammerspiel theater tradition, during the silent era, there was like a whole distinct genre of motion picture called the Kammerspiel film. Now, it didn't gain the popularity of German Expressionism. It didn't have German Expressionism stylized sets or fancy intertitles or fantastical imagery. It focused on psychological portraits of lower middle class characters with not a lot of fun intertitles, and it kept those sets realistically unspectacular for the most part. Some exceptions, of course. Um, the Last Laugh by Murnau is a great example of that kind of film, as is G.W. Pabst's Pandora's Box. The Strange Little Cat, kind of has some in common with those, adds a hefty dose of completely unorthodox perspective. Now, The Strange Little Cat was initially conceived as a Roman Zerker's thesis film for the German Film and Television Academy in Berlin. The somewhat legendary origin story is that The Strange Little Cat was developed in a workshop taught by really famous film director Bellatar. Bellatar, came to the workshop and told his students, "Hey, you got to adapt something with this film. You got to take a Franz Kafka piece, any Kafka you want, and adapt it, however loosely you want, but you got to start with Kafka." And so that's where Zerker, kind of took his first steps in the Strange Little Cat process by picking up the Metamorphosis, wherein Gregor Samsa, the protagonist, wakes up like the very first sentence of the book to discover that he has become some sort of monstrous insect, and then he experiences a whole lot of scorn and misery in his suddenly alienated body. Now, Zerker wasn't attracted so much to the idea of monstrous transformations per se as he was to the novella's portraiture of a family within like really purposeful spaces, the social kitchen versus the isolation of the bedroom. This distinction of spaces and the overall theme of isolation brushing against intimacy really seem to be the only commonalities between The Strange Little Cat and the Metamorphosis. Zerker, every time he does an interview about The Strange Little Cat, is always asked, "Hey, is this the Metamorphosis?" And he's really trying to emphasize every single time, No, not really, not anymore. It really did evolve a lot far, far away from that. But perhaps you will find differently. Despite the filmmaker's efforts to distance his film from Kafka, the movie might retain some familiar spirit of the Metamorphosis, almost as if the book itself has woken up radically reformed. No promises that that'll be your interpretation. It's not mine. Throughout the film, you're going to notice a few cool stylistic quirks here. The camera is static. It's not going to move. It's just going to always be still, but very strikingly positioned. It's going to be able to communicate intimacy, unfamiliarity, tedium, discovery, mystery, sometimes all in one shot, without moving an inch. And these shots may go on for a bit. And it's all about the movement within the frame, really. That's going to be what's exciting and thrilling in The Strange Little Cat. There's going to be a bunch of really cool choreography going on with everyday motion um, in the frame, and then movement and sound beyond the frame are going to be just like an extra bit of kinetic energy there for you. The apartment's corners and altitudes are really the field of play for cinematography. But the prop choices here too are just really always exciting to come back to for me whenever I watch this movie. There will be a sudden importance of a virtually unnoticeable object, transforming these nonchalant surfaces into just bursts of magic. And even when the surprise has already been made apparent and then recedes back into normality, that shock can still linger on. But now there's a new uncertainty of all the relationships going on in the frame. And every single time the film kind of goes into these permutations of its various constituent spaces and objects, you get a new way of seeing. A sequence may begin at the end of a hallway and play out under one set of assumptions of what you're seeing, only to cut to reveal a previously unseen spectator, repainting the action that we just witnessed. Now, these fat cuts aren't coming fast and furious, though. Zerker really tries to limit the amount of cutting going on here in his portrait of this family's life. It really seems like he wants to do as few cuts as possible. I mean, he did write and direct the picture, so maybe he figured to himself, hey, I'm going to edit this thing too. Might as well make it a little bit easier for the editing part. And so he has this precise, graceful choreography of everyday movement going on and on, but it never settles down into just one point of view. Things are always moving and dancing to new perspectives. Zerker describes this aspect of the film not as like it lacking a protagonist, but as it possessing a mobile sense of protagonism. It'll exist over with this one character for a little bit, and then move over to this other character, and then it'll be with this moth that flies into the film for a couple minutes, and then it'll go somewhere else entirely, and other times you're not sure where it is. It kind of might remind you of the way like chamber music utilizes its limited number of instruments to get all sorts of different emphases and effects. Speaking of the music, you're going to notice a musical score that seems a little bit repetitive. During the montages, there's like 4 instances of music throughout the entire movie. Sorry, music lovers, you're not going to get a ton of it here. So all of the music is from one song called Pulchritude, recorded by a San Francisco band, The More Shallows, off of their debut album, A History of Sport Fishing. So Charlie, you're definitely asking right about now, why aren't you talking more about the cat? The movie is called The Strange Little Cat. I want to hear about a strange little cat. I understand your concern. Here is the disappointing truth. The cat is neither little nor is it strange. It's an exceedingly normal cat. When pressed about the normality of the cat, the director has kind of historically shirked answering whether or not the feline in the movie is the titular cat, or whether there's some other entity that could be like associated with the title. Now, as an animal lover myself, I found myself needing to know more about the cat and dog that appear throughout the film, Casimir the orange cat, and Ferdy, credited as Ferdinand, the black lab. In their only published interview, animal trainer Jana Dobler revealed that Casimir and Ferdy actually lived together prior to being cast for the 30-day shoot. It explains their mutual comfort around each other. Wow, I'm running up on 10 minutes now. A very big thanks to all of you for clicking all the links you needed to click to arrive here. Thank you, Darren, for your kindness in granting me the space and opportunity to host this movie. Um, Never feels like the same movie twice. Seen it a million times. Hope you have fun. Enjoy the strange little cat.